here or vice versa. Because it's now it's not like macro. Now it's AutoCAD file.
Right, yeah.
You know. So I can go from
I guess that's a lot.
Wow, that is one long doggone lecture. Okay, so our next sort of region that we're going to be looking at, our next sort of area of architecture is an area called Mesopotamia. Okay? And again, going back to my desire that you all get a cognitive map of the world. The next thing that I want to talk to you guys about, and I'm referencing the globe that you guys built today. Incidentally, I'll be giving you a fresh copy of it that's unfolded that you can keep unfolded and put in your notebook. All right? So Mesopotamia, right, and we talked a little bit about it just a moment ago, is located, right, between Asia proper and the Arabian Peninsula, down beneath the Mediterranean Sea, going over to the Persian Gulf. Okay? And it's important that you guys start to identify those bodies of water. Remember, you're going to get a quiz on those bodies of water and those geographic areas.
Next week?
So, yeah.
Every week.
Every week you guys got quizzes. Okay? I'm sorry?
And at the end of class, when
No, you're not. I won't do that to you. I don't know. That's probably a good idea. Oh, all of a sudden you see these eyes burning into your back, don't you, buddy? Okay, anyway, so let's take another look at geographic regions. Now we're looking at it on Google Earth, and you guys can see, right, a little bit more clearly, because you can see the bodies of water. They look like bodies of water, and north is pointed up in this particular case. All right, if we zoom in a little bit more, we start to get in closer, and you start to see, I've labeled it, Persian Gulf, the Caspian Sea, the Mediterranean. You can start to see the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. You can see the Arabian Peninsula, and this green thing that's over here is the Nile.
that's
Okay.
the Red Sea right there, right?
Excuse me?
It's the Red Sea.
That's the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, I believe.
I got one.
Okay, so somebody was already looking this up. So what the heck does the word Mesopotamia mean? It is Greek, and it means between rivers. Okay? Between rivers. How many of you guys have heard of a place called the Fertile Crescent? Maybe you studied it at some point in high school? No? You did.
No. Do you want to fix the camera a little?
I don't think I can. I can try, but I don't think it's going to let me.
I think it's better how you had it last time.
Well, no, this is what I had last time, but
Did you have it first like that?
it's the same place. Anyway, continuing on. So this place called the Fertile Crescent, right, was a land where there were these rivers, and there was the Mediterranean Sea, and there were areas where there was fertile ground. Okay? And the Fertile Crescent is the birthplace of civilization. The earliest civilizations sprouted up in this area. Okay? Predominantly, the early civilizations occurred between the Tigris and the Euphrates down near the Persian Gulf. All right? One of the things that I think is important to note is, where is that in relationship to today's sort of geopolitical boundaries? Right? That means, where are their countries? And so Mesopotamia occurred along the Tigris and Euphrates, where right now is mostly Iraq, a portion of Syria, and the Fertile Crescent actually extended down this way through where Israel is, and Lebanon, and Jordan, sorry. And you can see where Turkey is. You can see the relationship of the different bodies of water that I'm asking you guys to memorize. Okay? So you should know not only the historical context, but also the current day context. Okay?
So we can all those.
Yeah, you can see that the area that's highlighted there, right? Look where Baghdad is. Now, Baghdad, you guys got to know. You guys got to have heard of Baghdad, right? I mean, we've had this prolonged wars there that aren't wars. There's something else. What are they called?
I call them wars.
Arguments.
They have another euphemism for them. I don't know.
Yeah, it was conflicts, I think.
Yeah. By presidential order, because there was no decree of war by Congress.
We're technically still in the Gulf War.
Okay, so all right, let's take a look at some relative time periods. So the first civilizations of Mesopotamia began approximately 500 years before Egypt. So that's an approximation. And they lasted the 30 century period that Egypt lasted. So what is 30 centuries? What is a century? 100 years. So 30 centuries is 3,000 years. That is more time than has existed in the current era. So in the current era, from approximately the death of Christ to now, has been 2017 years. So those civilizations existed for 3,000 years, okay, and they were mostly parallel, and you can see how close they were together. Can you imagine that there might have been contact between the two civilizations? Okay, so unlike Egypt, that region was not that well protected. There were neighboring tribes, right, and warring factions around it that, you know, caused problems. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers, as a geographical force, were very different than the Nile. The Nile flooded on a regular basis. It was very consistent, right? But the Tigris and Euphrates weren't that consistent. There were time periods of extreme drought. We've gone through this extreme drought here in California. You guys all know what that's like, right? You can't flush your toilet. You can't water your lawn. Don't let them catch you washing your car. And then we saw what happened last year when we got, I don't know how many inches of rain. Right? We got a boatload of rain. Okay, anyway, so that was one of the things that really was different in Mesopotamia than in Egypt. And I'm using them to contrast one with each other because they were contemporaries of each other for the most part. Mesopotamia beat them by 500 years to start, but we talked about the fact that it wasn't as stable, that there were surrounding sort of tribes and communities that essentially created wars there. Over that 3,000 year period, there was almost constant conflict. All right? Because of these conditions, what you got to understand is that Mesopotamia isn't one culture. What occurred in that Fertile Crescent, right, was actually 4 different cultures spanning an extremely long period of time. Okay? That make sense? So the 4 major periods of the Mesopotamian era include, number 1, Sumeria, Babylon, same thing. Okay? How many of you guys have ever heard the phrase, the Good Samaritan? The Good Samaritan is a biblical term. I believe it comes, I think it's from the Old Testament. It might be New Testament. I don't know. It's what?
It's a story told by Jesus to, I think, his disciples.
Yeah, but Samaria is definitely referenced in the Old Testament, but the Good Samaritan is one of the parables, right? So that's where it comes. That's the reference to it. Okay. Remember, I told you that this region was the birthplace of 3 of the 5 major religions on the face of this planet. The second time period was an Assyrian time period. Okay. Third was what they call Neo-Babylonian, which was an offshoot of the Assyrian period, blended with the Sumerian period. And then finally, the 4th one is the Persian era. Okay? Persia is essentially where modern-day Iran is. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the first period. And this presentation is divided into those periods. I can tell by the clock that there's no way in God's green earth that we're going to get through all of them today. So, Tarumi, take a note of where we finish so you don't expand your quiz past that point. All right, so again, taking a look at this. So the early part of the Sumerian period, look at the Tigris and the Euphrates and look at this other map here. What is this? You guys should know this by now. The Persian Gulf. What's this? Mediterranean, Dead Sea, Caspian Sea. So Turkey is this area right here. So you can see what we're talking about. So the early part of Mesopotamia did not reach up towards Turkey or did not reach up towards the Mediterranean. Those were later periods. Okay. So the oldest civilizations are listed right here. We're going to be looking at a couple of places in Uruk and Ur. Okay. Uruk is mentioned in the Bible. I believe in the Bible it's called Erech. So, all right, so let's keep going with this. So between 4000 and 3500 BCE, the small villages that were in the Euphrates and Tigris valleys, they started to kind of coalesce into these civilizations. They formed the first civilizations. Okay, and remember, I gave you a definition for civilization. So that word, you guys have to learn the definition of civilization and what the key aspects are to understand that phrase or that statement right there. Right? People started living closer together. There was a ruling elite that established sort of a culture. They started writing. There were about 4 points that I made. So know those 4 points because all this stuff is linked together. Okay? The people of Sumeria were involved in agriculture, pottery making, and cloth weaving. And the cloth weaving is an important part because you start to see that in the patterns that they used on their buildings. Okay, these guys developed. They were the first people to develop mathematics. There's evidence that they knew the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, they developed astrology, so they understood how the heavenly bodies moved across the global hemisphere. They developed the first sciences, which were more advanced. We often credit Egypt with having a lot of advancements. These guys, 500 years before, right, had much more evolved sort of connection to the sciences. Some of the things that they mastered, were the first to master, were hydraulics, how fluids move, right, and the properties of fluids. Drainage and irrigation. Let me ask you a question. Why did they have to learn those things? Louder, June.
Because it's still now, so I need to prepare plan like food or something. So I couldn't
Well, good point. It links back to this word right here, agriculture. Right? They couldn't just go out and put a sprinkler out there like we do nowadays, right? There weren't any sprinklers. They had to get water to their crops somehow. And so the need essentially led to their mastering the ability to irrigate and to understand how water moved and how gravity affected the motion of water. Okay? All right. Continuing on, do the next part. Right, Sumerian culture developed an ancient form of writing called cuneiform. I believe that's how it's pronounced, but I'm not sure. Okay, I'm really bad with these pronunciations, I'll tell you straight out. They began to record their history, and that separated them from what was going on in the rest of the world. The fact that they recorded history. They were the first civilization to move out of the prehistoric period. Because remember what prehistoric means, right? No, it is not Fred Flintstone. Prehistoric dealt with civilizations, or not civilizations, but they dealt with peoples that had no written language and therefore did not record their history. Okay? So they began to record everything. They also developed the first body of laws. How many of you guys have heard of an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth? Right? That was Hammurabi, King Hammurabi. How do I pronounce it?
Hammurabi.
Hammurabi. Sorry. Thank you for that. Okay. Huh? Oh, I'm at 14 already. All right, let me finish this slide. Okay, so one of the things you guys got to understand is that Sumerian religion, right, focused on the things that were important to an agricultural society. Okay? The sun, the earth, the moon, water, those things, right, had a lot of meaning to farmers. So it becomes important to understand that their religion was tied into that. About 2000 BC, Babylon became the capital of Samaria. And I'm going to stop here so that it doesn't get too long. Does that stop? That's